I really, really wish that we can do it the advanced way. I am thinking of doing Arabi or Islamic studies in Arabi. Hopefully, those kind of extensive classes. And let's see, hopefully, inshallah, if we do start with that, let's see where we're going and how this is going to work out. So, anyhow, so let's start with at least our hadith. We are at hadith number 165 and 166. Let's really quick just go over it. عن أم حبيبة أم المؤمنين رضي الله عنها قالت سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول ما من عبد مسلم يصلي لله كل يوم 12 ركعة تطوعا غير فريضة إلا بنى الله له بيتا في الجنة. Okay. So basically, we did talk about this hadith yesterday that every servant who prays 12 rak'ahs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every day as a voluntary prayer, but then we said this hadith is not referring to any voluntary prayer. This is referring to what is called sunan al-rawatib. What are sunan al-rawatib? Sunan al-rawatib are basically basically the sunan that are associated with the 5 daily prayers. Those are sunan al-rawatib. So those would be 2 before Fajr and 2 before and 2 after Dhuhr. But Dhuhr, remember, we said it has differences of opinions between the different narrations, whether it's 2 and 2, meaning 2 before and 2 after, or 2 before and 4 after, or whether it's 4 before and 2 after, or whether it's 4 before and 4 after. So looking at these numbers, all right, and differences of narrations, or well, let's not say differences of narrations, let's say different narrations, basically give all of those I guess opinions in regards to which combination for the dhuhr. Okay, Asr is not one of the Sunan al-Rawatib, but some scholars did include it as part of Sunan al-Rawatib, so that's just that. Is it 2 before or is it 4? Different narrations as well. Maghrib 2 after, and Isha 2 after. So if you were to count, well, where does the 12 actually go into that combination? Then you'll have that Dhuhr. Is it the 2? Is it the 4 that goes into that number in that combination as well? So this would be, like we said, غير الفريضة. This is not talking about 12 rak'ahs that are part of the obligatory prayers, but this is talking about Sunan al-Rawatib, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would build them a house in Jannah. Okay, this is not talking about the other prayers like duha, like, for example, Tahiyyat al-Masjid, like Salat al-Kusuf, etc. We'll talk about that, inshallah, during our fiqh of worship class. عن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يدع 4 قبل الظهر وركعتين قبل الغداة. Sayyidah Aisha had mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ did not abandon or leave the 4 rak'ahs before dhuhr, meaning the 4 sunan rawatib before dhuhr, or the 2 rak'ahs before fajr. Okay, so before fajr prayer, he would always pray it. Now, there is a hadith, or there are a hadith that did mention that the Prophet ﷺ sometimes had made it up on another time. But this is to say in la yada'u, this is basically let's call it the default. Normally he would not leave those sunan, especially dhuhr and especially fajr. So that was Sayyidah Aisha basically noting on that. Let's go for 167. عن عائشة رضي الله عنها عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ركعتا الفجر خير من الدنيا وما فيها. 2 rak'ahs during Fajr, or within Fajr, are basically better than what the dunya and everything in it contain. So what does that mean? Are we talking about rak'at al-fajr to mean salat al-fajr, the actual obligatory prayer? Is this to talk about the two sunnahs? This is to talk about the two sunnahs. If this is to talk about the two sunnahs, being better than what the world contains and everything in the world, all the beauty, all right, and what it contains. Well, just imagine the actual prayer itself. And certainly the actual prayer itself is going to be in a higher rank and a higher value, basically. Let's go 168. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال أوصاني خليلي صلى الله عليه وسلم بثلاث: صيام 3 أيام من كل شهر، وركعتي الضحى، وأن أوتر قبل أن أنام. This one you really gotta memorize. Let's see. عن أبي هريرة قال أوصاني خليلي. What is أوصاني خليلي? Is خليلي like a person from al-Khalil? No. أوصاني خليلي meaning my beloved one. Okay? My beloved one, that is the Prophet ﷺ, my friend, had advised me to do 3 things. Let's say fasting 3 days of every month, performing the 2 rak'ahs of duha prayer, and praying the witr before going to sleep. Okay, let's see. So, صيام 3 أيام من كل شهر. What 3 days are we talking about? We're talking about what are called أيام البيض. What are أيام البيض? أيام البيض would be the white days, and let's kind of look at really quick if we're talking about moon calendar, and let's talk about I guess the phases for Hijri. Okay, and let's talk about that. Let's see what it wants to give us, right? Here we go. Here we go. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Okay, so here's what you want to see. Okay, let's look at that. So let's make it big, okay, so you could see it better. Okay, so in the Hijri calendar, let's look at that one. I want to make sure you could really see this wide and clear. Okay, so this is basically those phases. So once it goes in this pattern, then you would basically have that, not necessarily a Saturday, but that would be the first of that month. Okay, now here are those moon days. Look at those full moons right there, 12, 13, 14, 15. So you would see the 13, 14, 15, they're basically the full moon days. Those full moon days would be considered the white days. You see it right there, 13, 14, 15. And of course, the phase, it starts out kind of like a small crescent, keeps growing by the day. And then on the 7th, it would be like half the size, or the 6th or the 7th, depending on whether it's 29 or 30 days. And then that's going to determine, of course, the phase. But on the 7th day, it would usually be half a moon, and certainly the same thing when we're speaking about that half the moon, then usually on the 22nd and 23rd would be the other half. You could see the other side of it, okay, because the sun and the earth rotation basically going and giving basically the appearance that it's half the moon, etc. So now you could see it growing, the basically the whiteness of it growing. And then in 13, 14, 15, those would be the full moon, and those would be the white days. Okay, so now we understand it. And let's go back to the hadith. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ, or at least Abu Huraira, basically said, "Awsani Khalili." So the Prophet ﷺ was basically giving him this will, this wasiyah. You want to be part of me, you want to join me, you would need to do these following things. Number 1, fasting 3 days of every month, which we just explained. It's basically the white days. All right, and rak'atay duha, and the 2 rak'ahs during duha. When is duha? So duha would be the window between sunrise, let's say complete sunrise, that way we won't confuse it while the sun is rising. So a complete sunrise would be, let's say, from the beginning of sunrise. So we're talking about almost half an hour after sunrise, half an hour, 40 minutes after sunrise. That's the beginning of it, and then the end would be when the sun is basically in the middle of the sky, which is basically right there, the first zawal. So that would be that would be known whether the sun is in the middle of the sky or not. That's before dhuhr. So we're speaking about before Adan al-Dhuhr, probably by maybe 40 minutes, half an hour. So that would be the end of duha prayer. So you can pray within that window. So we're looking here in Malaysia, perhaps maybe I would probably give or take maybe 8:20 a.m. till perhaps maybe 1 p.m. Well, maybe a little bit sooner, maybe 12:45 maybe p.m. So that would be the window to pray Salat al-Duha. How many rak'ahs can I pray Salat al-Duha? You can pray it 2 by 2, and you can pray it up to 11 rak'ah or 12 rak'ahs too. So 2 by 2 by 2, and then you could continue to make it 12 right there. Okay. And that's why some scholars actually said that this one is related to Duha prayer. Okay. وَأَنْ أُوتِرَ قَبْلَ أَنْ أَنَامَ. Oh, how do we pray Salat al-Duha? So you pray Salat al-Duha just like you pray any 2 rak'ahs. Okay. وَأَنْ أُوتِرَ قَبْلَ أَنْ أَنَامَ. What is أُوتِرَ قَبْلَ أَنْ أَنَامَ? To pray witr before sleeping. What does it mean to pray witr before sleeping? So what if I wanted to pray Qiyam al-Layl? Then you could delay praying witr until you do your Qiyam al-Layl, if you intend to do your Qiyam al-Layl. Some scholars did say that if you wanted, that's not necessarily all the scholars, just a note, but let's say you did witr already. Let's say you prayed 3 rak'ahs of witr already, okay? And you wanted to do Qiyam al-Layl, you did Qiyam al-Layl, but you thought, well, I already had done 3 witr. And some scholars had said, well, witr means odd numbers. So if you were to pray 1 more rak'ah, that would actually make it as an even number, and therefore that would cancel out witr / the odd number of witr. And then you can pray witr. Wait a minute. So why can't I pray it two times? And that's basically easier, because the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned la witrani fi layla. You cannot pray 2 witrs in one night. Okay, but the sunnah is to delay witr to make it the last thing that you pray. But if you knew yourself you weren't going to wake up to pray Salat let's say tahajjud, and you didn't want to miss out on witr prayer and tahajjud, you can definitely pray witr. Can I pray Salat al-Tahajjud even though I had already prayed witr? The answer is absolutely. You could pray tahajjud even if you had prayed witr. Okay, but that's a recommendation. Before you go to sleep, make sure that you are consistent with the witr prayer. And it's important to mention that the Prophet ﷺ, had mentioned in the Hadith, أَوْتِرُوا فَإِنَّهَا سُنَّةَ أَبِيكُمْ إِبْرَاهِيمَ. Pray witr because this is the sunnah or the habit that Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam used to practice. And then the Hanafi madhab, they debated whether the witr was actually obligatory or not. Now that was kind of strange, because why would they call it wajib? Why would they call it obligatory? So they called it obligatory because they said awtiru. They said that's an imperative verb right there. And if it's an imperative verb, that means it's an obligation. That means it's obligatory. But then the other scholars, they objected to it, and they said, well, the Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked what obligations we are basically required to do in Islam, and the Prophet ﷺ said, خَمْسُ صَلَوَاتٍ فِي الْيَوْمِ وَاللَّيْلَةِ, when he said 5 prayers throughout the night and throughout the day, and then he said, هَلْ عَلَيَّ غَيْرَهَا, that man was inquiring, is there anything else that I have to do? And he said, لَا إِلَّا أَن تَطَوَّعَ, no, unless you would like to contribute, unless you want to do something voluntary, that's a different story. So just by saying, لَا إِلَّا أَن تَطَوَّعَ, they said, well, that's our evidence that you cannot say that it's obligatory, but the definition of obligatory that is wajib for the Hanafi madhab is different than their definition for what is considered a farida. Okay, so for the Hanafis, wajib is different than fard. For the majority, wajib and fard are basically synonyms. They're the same thing. Okay. All right, so that's one thing right there. How do we pray witr? So witr can be from 3 to 11 or 3 to 13. Oh, sorry, not 3, but 1 to 11 to 1 to 13 rak'ahs. Wait a minute. So how did you say 1 to 11 and 1 to 13? Because there would be shafa. Okay, so that would basically, is it part of witr? Is it separate from witr? That's another debate. So just to let you know. Now, when you pray witr, you can pray it in one by one, or you can decide to pray it all set together. So 11 rak'ahs, for example, or 7 rak'ahs all together. Okay. And you wouldn't do tashahhud. That's the only difference. You wouldn't do tashahhud every 2 rak'ahs. You would only do tashahhud except for the 3 rak'ah, witr. We'll talk about that in just a bit. If it's a 5, 7, 11, 5, 7, 11, okay, then you would, or 9, you would basically do the tashahhud before the last rak'ah and in the last rak'ah. Okay? Before the last rak'ah and in the last rak'ah. But if it's a 3 rak'ah witr, you would not do the second tashahhud. That's the only difference. What about the ada? What about the dua? اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا. Now that's dua al-qunut. Should you do it during witr, during prayer, or outside of prayer? Is it during fajr? That's a very interesting debate between the Shafi'is and the rest, but okay, but that's also a considerable opinion to do that dua. Does it have to be that dua al-qunut? Do you have to do that dua? The answer is no. Can you do it? It's a considerable opinion that you would do the dua al-qunut basically after rising from the ruku' or before rising from the ruku'. Okay, differences of opinions. When you say differences of opinions, that means you just know that it's a considerable opinion. So what does dua al-qunut anyways? What does it mean? Allahumma hdini fi man hadayt. Or Allahumma hdina fi man hadayt. Ya Allah, guide us as those that you have guided. Wa tawallana fi man tawallayt. And be our place of guidance. In other words, be our authority, our place of guidance, as those that were basically embracing you as their place of guidance, as their authority. وَتَوَلَّنَا فِي مَنْ تَوَلَّيْتَ وَبَارِكْ لَنَا فِي مَا أَعْطَيْتَ. And bless us with the things that you had blessed us with, as the things that you had given us. وَقِنَا بِرَحْمَتِكَ. And fill us and embrace us with your mercy. وَقِنَا بِرَحْمَتِكَ وَاصْرِفْ عَنَّا شَرَّ مَا قَضَيْتَ. And keep away the decrees, the evil decrees, or the decrees that contain evil, away from us. وَاصْرِفْ عَنَّا شَرَّ مَا قَضَيْتَ. إِنَّكَ تَقْضِي بِالْحَقِّ. You, and that's basically to teach us a lesson. إِنَّكَ تَقْضِي بِالْحَقِّ. For you would rule in justice, in truth, وَلَا يُقْضَى عَلَيْكَ. And no one would decree over your decree. Your decree basically is precedent, and your decree overcomes all wills. إِنَّكَ تَقْضِي بِالْحَقِّ وَلَا يُقْضَى عَلَيْكَ إِنَّهُ لَا يَذِلُّ مَنْ وَالَيْتَ. Anybody that you were their authority would never be humiliated. وَلَا يَعِزُّ مَنْ عَادَيْتَ. وَلَا يَعِزُّ مَنْ عَادَيْتَ. And those that are enemy to you, they would not be honored. In other words, honor only comes through you. Only comes through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم صلاة الليل مثنى مثنى فإذا خشي أحدكم الصبح صلى ركعة واحدة توتر ما توتر له ما قد صلى. So صلاة الليل, let's see how they translated it, right? Let's see, the night prayer is 2 by 2, and if one of you fears the dawn, he should pray 1 rak'ah to make up for what he had prayed. Okay, so Salatul Layl, we're speaking about basically night prayer. So if you wanted to do Qiyam al-Layl, you would do it in a set of two rak'ahs in a set of two. And if a person إذا خشي أحدكم الصبح صلى ركعة واحدة توتر له. If you fear that staying up late is probably going to be maybe risking your Fajr prayer, then just pray 1 rak'ah of witr just to make sure that you don't miss out on what's more important, which basically is Salat al-Subh. So the Fajr prayer is basically to be considered more important than the voluntary prayer, Salat al-Witr, or even Salat al-Tahajjud. So don't stay up all night praying Salat al-Tahajjud and missing out on on a Fajr prayer. That makes no sense. So the Prophet ﷺ was basically teaching us right there, مثنى مثنى. Okay, عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال اجعلوا آخر صلاتكم بالليل وترا. Okay, make your last prayer at night the witr. I think that's poor English, am I right? Make your last prayer at night the witr, or isn't it make witr as the last prayer you pray at night? I don't know, that's how I would say it. Okay. اجعلوا آخر صلاتكم بالليل وترا. Let's see, the question. What about instead of getting up for tahajjud, we make dua while in bed? Okay, I mean, that wouldn't be considered the actual tahajjud, but let's say it this way. Making dua in bed is certainly better than not making the dua. Okay, so let's call it training in the making. Okay, so if you're making dua in bed, that's basically a good start. Okay, if you were to get up and not necessarily stay in bed, hey, now you're multiplying your credit by, let's say, 1,000, because definitely, hey, wiping up that sleep, making that wudu, getting up, that's basically going up for Qiyam al-Layl. So wait a minute. So how are they different? Remember when the ayah in Surah al-Dhariyat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised وَبِالْأَسْحَارِ هُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised the people that would basically make istighfar during the night. But he also had praised those that would get up at night and pray Qiyam al-Layl during the night. Even if it's 2 rak'ahs, just get up. And I would usually say, even if you just get up during the night, it doesn't have to be long. It can be really short. In fact, the Sayyidah Aisha had said that she would see the Prophet ﷺ praying Qiyam al-Layl and she would wonder whether he had read Surah al-Fatiha or not, because it would be quite fast. He wasn't taking too long doing it. Okay, so that's basically just one thing. So even, yes, doing istighfar or doing dua or tasbih while you're in bed has its credit, and getting up has its, let's call it, magnificent reward and credit. Okay. اجعلوا آخر صلاتكم بالليل وترا. We just talked about that, making witr as the last prayer, but certainly if you do witr, can you do it again? We talked about that before. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا أقيمت الصلاة فلا صلاة إلا المكتوبة. إذا أقيمت الصلاة. If the prayer, see, when the prayer is called, there's no prayer except the obligatory one. No. Definitely the translation is not giving it what is really meant by it. إذا أقيمت الصلاة. What is أقيمت الصلاة? أقيمت الصلاة, this is talking about أقيمت الصلاة to mean the prayer in congregation. Okay, so let's say you're going to the masjid, they started a congregation prayer, Salat al-Jama'ah, right there for Salat al-Dhuhr. Well, since they started for Salat al-Dhuhr, don't start thinking of, well, I would like to pray Tahiyat al-Masjid, I would like to pray perhaps a messed up prayer, etc. That's it. They started Salat al-Dhuhr, it's the Jama'ah Salat al-Dhuhr, join along, and La Salat illa al-Maktuba. Right now, just focus on that obligatory prayer that basically they are doing the congregation for. Okay? And فلا صلاة إلا المكتوبة. No prayer except no prayer that is to be done at that moment, except the prayer that is the required prayer. So when you say the written one, it's not written per se to mean literally written, but this is to say the obligated prayer at that moment, which let's say Salat al-Dhuhr, if that's what they're doing the Jama'ah for right now in the masjid, that's basically within that premise of the masjid, within that jama'ah, so that's what you're going to do. Okay, but let's say I was at home and I had some prayers to make up. Okay, does that mean I would have to pray dhuhr first? The answer is no, because this is not talking about the time frame. This is talking about if an actual congregation is taking place, you need to join along in there if you did not already pray. What if I had already prayed? What if I had already prayed dhuhr? Okay, I go into the masjid and there are these people that I guess they come in, they're praying salat together. Can I just join along as a voluntary prayer like that? The answer is yes. You can join. What if it's Asr that I had already prayed? Well, you can't pray after Asr. But if it's any other prayer, other than Asr and Fajr, you could definitely join along. Okay, and that would be joining along as a voluntary prayer. So what if they prayed four? Should I break it into basically twos? No, continue along with them. Okay, and that way you could create and join that jama'ah and get the reward for it. Even if I had prayed, yes, even if you had prayed, but they would have their intention. I would have a completely different intention. They're praying dhuhr and I would be praying just a nafil. Certainly, you wouldn't pray dhuhr two times. You would come in, join along with them with a nafil intention, but they would have a farida intention. Okay, إذا أقيمت الصلاة. Okay, here's a question. What the window of time when you pray at the, okay, fair enough. So for the time, for the prayer for Salat al-Qiyam al-Layl, basically, that would be from the Isha time, all the way until Fajr. So once Adhan al-Fajr does happen, you're still, well, if the Fajr prayer is basically called out, Adhan al-Fajr, that's the end of it. Okay, so when Isha starts, that's the timing, and that would be the beginning of the window of Qiyam al-Layl. Tahajjud is after you would sleep. Let's say you sleep even if it's an hour, 20 minutes or whatever, and you wake up, then you would do tahajjud. Okay. All right. Is tahajjud different than Qiyam al-Layl? Well, technically they're all Qiyam al-Layl, okay? But when you sleep and then you wake up, that would be considered tahajjud. The naming is basically different, but the action is still the same. You would pray it mathna. You would pray it in a set of two. Okay, so the act is the same. There's no difference. It's just let's call it the classification.
What about the reward?
The reward for tahajjud and qiyam al-layl, tahajjud definitely takes a higher reward. Especially the farther out in the night, the bigger the reward. So if you're let's say praying to Qiyam al-Layl, let's say right after Isha, you can, but is the reward the same as waking up at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. and doing your tahajjud then? No, it's not the same. But if hey, I still want to do Qiyam al-Layl, I have to go to work tomorrow. I'm a person that I can't wake up and disrupt my sleep at 2 a.m. and do all of that, I would be okay with, and I'll be capable of doing it probably on the weekend, maybe at a Friday night, and maybe Saturday night I would be able to do that, because on Sunday I would have to make sure that I would get a good night of sleep to wake up for Monday, for example. And but I would be capable of doing it right after Isha, just because I don't want to miss out on Qiyam al-Layl. You could do that. Okay, you can do that. And what if a person said, no, I would like to challenge myself, and it's not easy. Not everyone's sleep patterns are the same. So there's definitely room for those that would like to do Qiyam al-Layl but have, let's call it, a sleepy head, and they cannot whatsoever wake up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m., disrupt their sleep, because that's going to affect basically their day throughout, basically work, and their ability to take a nap is not available, and etc. So then, yes, you've got that window. اوكي. عن ابي هريره رضي الله عنه ان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: من ادرك ركعه من الصلاه فقد ادرك الصلاه. من أدرك ركعة من الصلاة فقد أدرك الصلاة. Okay, whoever catches a rak'ah of prayer has caught the prayer. So whoever catches a rak'ah of prayer has caught the prayer. That kind of sounds weird. Okay, let's see. من أدرك ركعة. What does من أدرك? أدرك. أدرك means you reach the prayer. So what does that mean? I reached a prayer. So that actually means a number of different things. Number one, let's say you come in their Salat Jama'ah and you only made it for the ruku'ah, or you basically joined along for one rak'ah. That means you made it for the Salah. Okay. And that doesn't mean that that rak'ah should suffice. You would make up the rest of what you had missed out after they would do their taslim. Okay. That's number one. Number two, من أدرك ركعة من الصلاة فقد أدرك الصلاة. Let's say Dhuhr ends at 2:35, and you basically did a rak'ah, okay, at 2:32. Okay, that means you had basically prayed within the time frame. Well, that doesn't mean to encourage you to delay prayer, but this is to let you know that it is basically considered, even though you probably had prayed the third and fourth rak'ah within the parameter of Asr, it would still be considered that that person made it within the time frame, because they prayed one rak'ah, made it during the time frame. Okay, just wanted to note that. Okay. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال: سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: إذا أقيمت الصلاة فلا تأتوها تسعون وأتوها تمشون، عليكم السكينة، فما أدركتم فصلوا وما فاتكم فأتموا. إذا أقيمت الصلاة فلا تأتوها. If the prayer basically, of course, we're talking about الإقامة here, we're talking about the prayer in congregation. Okay, don't come to it basically in scurry, but in running or jogging, but come to the prayer in a walking mode, because you want to maintain a sakina. What is sakina? Sakina here, you translate it with calmness. So calmness, tranquility. Sakina is basically when you have your full focus, when you have that moment of tranquility, you're feeling connected to the prayer. And if you were to run, then you're basically feeling separated. You're basically trying to focus on running and focusing on that, then your ability to probably, by the time you get to prayer, then you're probably out of breath to even read the Fatiha, focus on your prayer. So the Prophet ﷺ is basically telling you, well, don't come running, and just basically come in walking, come in prepared mentally, physically. فَمَا أَدْرَكْتُمْ فَصَلُّوا وَمَا فَاتَكُمْ فَأَتِمُّوا. Then what you were capable of following along, what you were capable of catching in terms of prayer, then join along with them and start praying. So What are you going to do? Well, ما أدركتم فصلوا. If you got to the second rak'ah, that you don't have to ask the person next to you and I guess nudge them or tell them, hey, what rak'ah are they on? It's enough for you, just join along and do as they do, and then you would basically be counting your set of rak'ahs. In that situation, once they do their taslim, you're then going to count what rak'ahs you missed out on, and then you are basically going to make up the number of rak'ahs that you had missed out on. Basically, you're going to make it up after they make their taslim. So you don't want to make up those rak'ahs before they would finish their prayer. And I would see that often. Well, sisters coming in, and then this imam, for example, is probably on the third rak'ah, so she'll really quick and really fast, she'll basically pray the 2 rak'ahs while the imam is reading his Fatiha and reading his Quran. That's absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. The Prophet ﷺ basically said, فَمَا أَدْرَكْتُمْ فَصَلُّوا. Just pray along and join along with what they're praying. And وَمَا فَاتَكُمْ فَأَتِمُّوا. And then what you had missed out on, you're basically فَأَتِمُّوا. Then the word فَأَتِمُّوا means you're going to make up the rest of the set after they would do that. Let's see. Sister is asking, you must pray 2 rak'ahs before the end of time frame of prayer for it to be counted. Is that correct? No, dear. Just الشروع في الصلاة. So if just by saying Allahu Akbar, okay, just by saying Allahu Akbar, that would mean if it happens before, let's say, Adhan al-Asr, let's say, and you wanted to pray Dhuhr, and you said Allahu Akbar, you started your ruku'ah, you basically started your rak'ah, that would mean you had made it to be within the time frame. Just continue, don't stop. Don't stop because, oh, I just missed out on my dhuhr because Asr just made the adhan. No, just continue. You had made it for dhuhr because it's within the time frame. Well, it doesn't mean you would delay your prayer till the last minute because that's basically Salat al-Munafiqeen. Remember that one. Remember وَيْلُ الْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ. That's basically that piece of it. That's basically وَيْلُ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ. Those are basically the ones to continuously delay or procrastinate their prayers, and those would be the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically said وَيْلُ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ, that they would basically have a certain punishment right there. Ya Allah, نسأل الله العفو والعافية. عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال سووا صفوفكم فإن تسوية الصفوف من إقامة الصلاة. سووا صفوفكم. Wonder how he translated it. Straighten your rows, for straightening the rows is part of establishing prayer. I cannot make a better translation than that. سووا. What does التسوية actually mean? التسوية means to straighten something. التسوية means to make sure that we have the rows in a way that basically follows a certain pattern. That pattern is basically the pattern of a straight line right behind the imam. The question is, where does the line actually start? Where does the line behind the imam start? If it's a men's prayer, and let's say this is the imam, this is where the line starts. The line starts right behind the imam. Then we would fill the right row. This is my right. Okay, and then we would fill the left row. Okay, and then the second row also starts from here. Okay, we would fill the right, and then we would fill the left. Okay, that's what would be the sunnah. Many people would think that they were supposed to start here, but that's not actually accurate. It starts right behind the imam, and then you would fill the right and then fill the left. As for the women's jama'ah is different because the female imam, well, not according to the Maliki. For the Malikis, there's no such thing as women leading prayer to women. Okay, so let's say for the women, the imam, the female imam is basically standing within the row. So basically filling out the row like that. Okay, And here we go. These would be the women rows. The woman does not stand in front. Okay. So that's basically just a clarification. Okay. So when you talk about سَوُّوا صُفُوفَكُمْ, we're speaking about making sure that the lines are straight. So can we use things like tape and masking tape or whatever it is on the carpet to make sure that people are following a straight line? So certainly the Prophet ﷺ would basically use, it was like a stick to make sure that everybody's shoulders are basically shoulder to the shoulder, the ankle to the ankle, and that way they could see that they're basically making a straight line. فإن تسوية الصفوف من إقامة الصلاة. تسوية الصفوف meaning that by straightening the lines of prayer, that's part of establishing the prayer, that's part of the prayer, and therefore that's basically what would make that prayer, one, have its power in bringing spirituality to you, to the people next to you, and basically making that prayer more than just a movement that you would do. But of course, certainly there are certain things that we may not even know. So what is the power of Salat al-Jama'ah? Especially if we're speaking about Salat al-Jama'ah in a masjid, what is the power there? Why did the Prophet ﷺ actually say that the power of Salat al-Jama'ah is multiplied by 25 or by 27? Okay, why is it multiplied? And what influence, what impact does it have on our spirituality? And you just want to keep in mind that there are certain vibes, influences, implications that you may or may not recognize, and certain prayers, certain ibadat are only to be done in jama'ah, are only to be done in congregation. Even if I'm introverted, even if you're introverted. There are certain things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling you that you have to do in jama'ah, and that's basically to let you know that there is a certain influence, there's a certain vibe, there's a certain effect that you may not recognize, that it basically has a power to change within you, to keep you stronger in faith. So to somehow completely isolate from the society is not necessarily what Islam would always encourage you to do. In fact, encouraging you to establish certain congregations is basically part of what Islam had ordered you to do. In fact, there's nothing in a bigger congregation than Hajj. That's combining 3-point-something million people right there. All right. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال خير يوم طلعت عليه الشمس يوم الجمعة فيه خلق آدم وفيه أدخل الجنة وفيه أخرج منها ولا تقوم الساعة إلا في يوم الجمعة. The best day that had basically sunrise was on a Friday. It was the day that Adam was created in. It was the day that he entered Jannah, and it was the day that he basically got out of Jannah. Is it the actual Jannah, that one that we're going to? Differences of opinions between scholars on whether it's the actual Jannah that we're gonna, inshallah ya Rabbi, that we would be going to after Judgment Day, or whether this is talking about, no, that there was, I guess, a beautiful place that he was in, a garden on earth, and that he basically, because of sin, he basically didn't have the same privileges that he had before. So differences of opinions between scholars, whether ukhrija minha, whether that also means he was expelled from it, or whether that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he said that قُلْنَا اهْبِطُوا مِنْهَا جَمِيعًا, to basically ihbitu. It basically means to go down in something. Did they really descend literally, or is this descending in status? Or did they descend from a position to a position? What are we looking at? Like floor, let's say 12 to floor 2, for example? Is this really what it's looking like? Or is this speaking about, no, this person descended in status and not necessarily in an actual place? So you could say the differences of opinions. That's all alam al-ghaib. So you don't really have to stress about, well, I would like to get more details and know all the details, because even scholars had differences of opinions on that, because the wording is rather containing some ambiguity. That's number one. Number two, the wording itself doesn't have all the details to tell us really whether this is one specific Jannah or whether it basically has multiple types of Jannahs, or is it basically telling us that this is the al-Jannah to mean a more specific Jannah, or is this a Jannah to mean a more, let's say, comprehensive Jannah to include any garden on earth? So anyhow, and in the end, just keep in mind that this is part of al-ghaib. This is part of the unseen. To stress about it, at the end, just know differences of opinions between scholars. Don't get yourself into wanting to know all the details, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter as long as you really know that missed out on privileges, did not basically stay within, of course, the restrictions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had put on him, and basically this is how it impacted us, etc. Okay. وَلَا تَقُومُ السَّاعَةُ إِلَّا فِي يَوْمِ الْجُمُعَةِ. And Judgment Day would not happen except on a Friday. Let's see. So what about Ashrat al-Sa'a? What about the signs of Judgment Day? Like, do they happen on a Friday? No, not necessarily. Because the signs of Judgment Day, they would basically, there would be the major signs of Judgment Day, and there would be the minor signs of Judgment Day. The major signs of Judgment Day wouldn't necessarily happen on a Friday. They could just happen on any day. The minor signs of Judgment Day are usually taking longer. So let's say they don't necessarily happen within a snap. They usually happen within, let's say, this type of a transition. It's a process that leads them to that type of behavior or that type of probably transition, whether it's a political transition or whether it's a behavioral one. And certainly those changes, they basically go in a slow process. They basically are in a process and basically influencing the society, not necessarily on a Friday, because it takes a certain time frame. Okay. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: إذا قلت لصاحبك أنصت يوم الجمعة والإمام يخطب فقد لغوت. What does that mean? If you say to your companion, listen on Friday while the Imam is delivering the ceremony, then you have engaged in idle talk. Idle talk? Okay, let's break it down. If you were to tell your friend, is it really friend or companion? It's basically the person next to you. It doesn't mean that this is my friend or, how long we've known each other for. That's not what matters. Here, this is basically letting us know that if the person is engaging in some speech, even if that meant to silence the person, to tell them to stay quiet, to basically listen to the khutbah, etc., as long as that person is engaging in some kind of a talk and not necessarily listening to the sermon, then in that situation, they're actually engaging, if the khutbah is already active, then in that situation, you only have one responsibility to do, which is listen, stay quiet, and just pay attention to the khutbah. Even if I don't like the person that is giving the the khutbah, yes, even if you don't like the person even if I don't understand it, the language, it's a completely different language. Yes, even if you don't understand the language, just sit and listen and remember, just by being within that group, that in itself basically has some influence that you may not realize. فقد لغط. What is اللغو? اللغو is any vain talk. Any vain talk, any talk that's not permissible is اللغو. All right. So even if it may seem that you're trying to basically bring about, let's call it structure to the khutbah, to Salat al-Jumu'ah, etc., the Prophet ﷺ is telling you, you just work on yourself, just stay quiet, don't silence others, and that will probably bring about the structure of it later. Okay. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من صام رمضان إيمانا واحتسابا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. Whoever fasts Ramadan out of faith in the hope of reward will be given for his previous sins, will be forgiven for his previous sins. Cannot make a better translation than that. Man Sama Ramadan, whoever fasts Ramadan, when you say out of faith and in hope of reward, what does it mean out of faith? Out of faith meaning you recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically obligated you to fast and you are sincere in your fasting. So out of faith meaning sincerity. Okay. And ihtisaban would basically mean that all the effort that you are putting in, the hardship that you're probably going through, you recognize that the reward is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you're engaging and you are being patient in basically fasting Ramadan, etc., because that would be something that you would hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reward you for, and know that fasting on certain people is harder than on others. Just keep that one in mind. So for the people that struggle with fasting, remember that الأجر على قدر المشقة. The reward is basically going to be determined based on the effort and based on the hardship that a person is going through. So what does that mean? If fasting is harder on you, you will be rewarded, inshallah, more than the other person that to them fasting is not a big deal. Because, of course, the way we might endure thirst or might endure hunger, it differs from one person to another based on the metabolism, based on their body, etc. So that's not our place to analyze medically and in what really happens scientifically. But here we're just talking about, at the end of the day, certainly, if you endure a lot of hardship to practice this ritual, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you based on the hardship that you basically are enduring. Just keep that one in mind. Because I know I've had a lot of phone calls of sisters basically complaining that they are enduring a lot of hardship, etc. So at the end, إن الله يحب أن تؤتى عزائمه كما يحب أن تؤتى رخصه. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes that people would certainly embrace the different permissions to give up on the fast, as He would also like that people would embrace the hardship or the challenges. What does that look like? So let's say somebody is diabetic, okay? Diabetic simply means they have to take certain medications. Diabetic means the thirst, the hunger, etc. is not like any other person. They will get dizzy if they fast. They might actually pass out, etc. So that's because their body is not capable of handling it. Okay, let's say it's a nursing woman. Of course, not all women are capable of fasting while nursing, depending on also the baby's stage of, well, not only their stage, but stage of development. You know, if we're talking about a child that's probably 6 months, they're able to take in solids. Okay. They're able to take in solids, but it's completely different when it's a 4 month baby who's solidly dependent on basically you for nutrition. And if you're not basically making enough milk, then the child is going to be crying. The child is basically malnutrition. The child is not getting enough sleep and continuously crying because you're low on your milk production, basically. And why? Because you're not drinking enough, you're not eating enough. So in that situation, it's completely different if we're talking about a mother of a 4 month baby and a mother of an 8 month baby, because an 8 month baby, by now, they should be basically taking in some solids and they're capable of getting in some solids. But let's just say this mother is saying, yes, my child is 8 months, but he's constipated. He's constipated, and we're trying to figure out the right diet, the right foods. We're still struggling with that. Then, depending on the circumstance, it's not necessarily that one thing fits all, and we have to basically say, okay, if it's 6 months, you cannot, and if it's 4 months, it doesn't go like that. It basically requires a person to have the ijtihad looking into their own situation. So it's not ijtihad done by me, but it's an ijtihad done by you at that moment. Are you really capable of introducing solids? Are you capable of trying to, let's say, be consistent with your fasting? Are you doing your homework, etc.? That's an ijtihad that you have to work on, and not necessarily a fatwa that, yeah, I got this fatwa and they said that I don't have to fast and that I could basically make it into a fidya, etc. So then in that situation, I could just pay it. And then we would say, well, did you do your part of ijtihad? Did you do your piece of homework to make sure that you, as much as you can, that despite the hardship, that you are contributing as much as you can. غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would basically wipe the sins that they had basically previously made or committed. So what does that mean? Let's say yesterday you did this sin, the day before it, a number of different sins. Are we talking about major sins as well here? Or are we talking about minor sins? Most scholars said that this is related to minor sins and not major sins. Wait a minute. So why not major sins included? Major sins, most major sins, either have one, a had, which basically means a certain punishment, and it's not enough to just fast Ramadan or pray here and there, but that actually requires that the person would probably get a certain punishment, pay a certain expiation. In other words, a different contribution. And it wouldn't be enough to say, okay, well, I did fast from Ramadan to a Ramadan, Jum'ah to a Jum'ah, I'm all cleared up and I'm all okay. No, there are certain sins, especially if they're major sins, that actually require a bigger investment, and it's not enough to just say, well, I'm on track with my basics in Islam. Okay, let's see. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أفضل الصيام بعد رمضان شهر الله المحرم وأفضل الصلاة بعد الفريضة صلاة الليل. Okay. So the best of the fasts are basically fasting the month of al-Muharram. Okay. And afdal salah, and the best of the prayers are basically the prayers that you would pray during the night. What does it mean to pray during the night? Praying during the night actually means praying, you're praying basically qiyam al-layl. Okay. After the 5 daily prayers, the best of the prayers are basically the ones that you would pray during the night. Basically قيام الليل. عن أبي قتادة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال 3 من كل شهر ورمضان إلى رمضان هذا صيام الدهر كله. 3 من كل شهر. 3 days every month, if you were to fast them, that is the white nights, the white days, remember the full moon days? ورمضان إلى رمضان. And from Ramadan, meaning from this year, let's say Ramadan of the year 2025, and the following Ramadan of 2026, just by fasting these two sets right there, that what is in between, basically, if you were to be consistent in fasting the three white nights of every month, basically الأيام البيض, and from Ramadan to the Ramadan, it basically would give you the reward of fasting as if you fasted forever, الدهر, all your life. So what does that mean? Like the reward of it? Certainly, the reward. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال العمرة إلى العمرة كفارة لما بينها والحج المبرور ليس له جزاء إلا الجنة. What does العمرة إلى العمرة mean? So we're speaking about Umrah to Umrah is expiation for what comes between them. And an accepted Hajj brings no less than paradise reward. So al-Umrah ila al-Umrah. So from one Umrah to another Umrah. But wait a minute. Can I do more than one Umrah in one travel? Differences of opinions between scholars. You will say, for example, Hanbali would be really strict and say you could only do one Umrah, and that is the Sunnah in one travel. And they would disagree with the opinion to go for التنعيم / Bayt Aisha and do your ihram there and come back and do another Umrah for probably a relative, a dead relative, a deceased relative, or probably someone else. And they considered that no, you need to basically do one Umrah per travel. All right. That's according to the Hanbali. Other scholars, they said that no, you can do a Umrah and then you can do another Umrah and a third and a fourth, etc. If you were to go to Tan'im, basically do your ihram there and basically come back and start doing Umrah. Well, what is Umrah and what is a set of Umrah? So Umrah would basically be one, it would start from al-Miqat. Al-Miqat would be the designated area that you would officially start your Umrah or Hajj from, which let's just say most people would start from Abar Ali, but that's not everybody. Depends on which region you're coming from. But then let's say they started from, let's say Dhul Hulayfa, then that would be the place that they would start from. Now, pay attention to this. I would get sisters often skipping basically that ihram, thinking that, well, because she has her period, she shouldn't be doing the ihram and staying at the miqat. Absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. And this is so often that sisters would say, well, I had my period, didn't basically do my ihram during the miqat, and I was waiting for my period to finish. Can I just go for it tan'im? You were supposed to do your miqat even though you had your period. To stand and start your ihram.
That's why your class is so important. That's coming up.
This is so common, Nora, that they would basically make these mistakes and they would think, oh, I thought this way. Well, you need to join those classes before you make these mistakes.
Yeah, so, that's true, because that's a big one.
Absolutely. Joining and being in al-miqat and starting your ihram from al-miqat does not require tahara. It doesn't require tahara. Yes, it's sunnah to basically do your shower, clip your nails. This is all sunnah, but being in that miqat and being and starting your intention and your niyyah and announcing your niyyah during that place and in that place is basically a pillar. You traveled all that distance to do this. Now you're missing out on a major pillar? So what to do if basically I'm not sure if I'm going to be finished with my period or not? There's a considerable opinion that the person, let's say that this woman would basically محلي حيث حبستني محلي حيث حبستني my basically my ability to maintain this ihram would be where I'm not capable of continuing. حيث حبستني. Basically could be in that situation couldn't continue, or probably this person was not finished with her period, even though she's basically done all the different things, but didn't finish her period, and they're about to leave. So should I do tawaf or not? Do tawaf. If you can't stay, and you can't stay for that time, and certainly then do tawaf. Do tawaf, at least the pillar tawaf. We're talking about the pillar tawaf. And we're seeing sisters actually confusing a lot of their rituals because they didn't want to attend classes. I'm sorry. If you're not going to attend classes, you're going to be confusing not only your rituals, but you're going to be confusing your life too. It's very important to attend the classes, to learn your Islam, so you can avoid making mistakes, whether in your relationship, whether in your finances, whether in your ritual, etc. Allah al-Musta'an. Okay. العمرة إلى العمرة كفارة لما بينهما. كفارة لما بينهما, meaning between one umrah and another, is basically an expiation. What does it mean to be an expiation? It means it removes and wipes and basically all those sins that were previously committed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would wipe them. وَالْحَجُّ الْمَبْرُورُ لَيْسَ لَهُ جَزَاءٌ إِلَّا الْجَنَّةِ. What is al-Hajj al-Mabrur? Here, an accepted Hajj? No, not quite. It's not al-Hajj al-Mabrur لَيْسَ لَهُ جَزَاءٌ إِلَّا الْجَنَّةِ. So we're talking about al-Hajj al-Mabrur is when a person فَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ. لا رفث ولا فسوق ولا جدال في الحج. During Hajj, there would be no rafath. What is rafath? Rafath is flirtation. So woman and a husband, they're not allowed to flirt, not with body language, not with words, not any type of flirtation, even if that meant some signaling. All right.
Should we just not go with our husbands?
Well, if you want to go with your son, go ahead. But what if your husband was the only one? Just make sure you stay committed during Hajj. Don't get into any form of flirtation, any form of a body language, any form of wording, any form of
That's so hard because, like, you're married. You know what I mean? Like, you're used to. Oh, sorry.
واسكتي يا نورة، واسكتي. Just stay quiet. All right. So in the end is that, of course, the husband and the wife, they basically have to basically stay committed. So لا رفث ولا فسوق. What is fusuq? Al-fusuq is any form, probably because you're angry at these people while they're not in line, they're not doing Hajj right, and definitely so many things are going to get you agitated. Okay, so what you need to do is basically you're supposed to maintain your adab, maintain your patience. It's the patience in training, basically, at that moment. How do you train yourself to maintaining that adab? It's basically that time for Hajj. Yeah, so many things. You're going to see people shoving. You're going to see people basically not dressed properly. You're going to see things that you probably never seen before. But this is what Hajj is all about. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, فَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ. It's basically a training in how you can maintain your patience. You can learn how to keep up with your with your commitment to keeping up with your akhlaq during Hajj, your social skill training, let's say it that way. ولا جدال في الحج, and there's no arguing. So if you guys had differences of opinions on whether we should take bus A or B, now is not the time to argue. You know what? Go for B or whatever it is. Don't argue. Don't argue. Why can't? Because it's a training. Because Hajj is all about training your stamina, training your endurance, training your patience, training your social skills, and training your submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's basically training you to make sure that you learn how to stay committed, consistent with the principles and the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if you had a point, you basically just learn how to not argue. Just learn how to stay silent. Okay. والحج المبرور would basically, if the person was committed, لا رفث ولا فسوق ولا جدال في الحج, they did the Hajj basically right, then there's no reward for it but Jannah. Here we go. Let's see. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه. So there comes والحج المبرور. What's the evidence that that's what basically I had described, that that's basically what makes الحج المبرور, that it's basically لا رفث ولا فسوق ولا جدال في الحج. It's basically this hadith. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من حج هذا البيت فلم يرفث ولم يفسق رجع كيوم ولدته أمه. Okay. من حج هذا البيت, whoever had basically done al-Hajj around this bait, basically this is exclusive to meaning Mecca or al-Kaaba. فَلَمْ يَرْفُث, and then they did not do any type of flirtation, whether we're speaking about speech or behavior or body language or whatever. وَلَمْ يَفْسُقْ, and they did not engage in any type of fusuq, maybe bad words, maybe swearing at somebody, maybe hitting somebody, etc. That's all fisq. Then when they would come back as the same basically status, the same way that that their mother had bore them, basically with no sin. Okay, so the sister here in the chat is asking, I saw some people that did tawaf al-wada' while menstruating. Was that right to do? No, dear. So while menstruating, the only tawaf that you would do is basically the tawaf that is the pillar tawaf. Only the pillar tawaf, but not the sunan tawaf. Sunan tawaf, you don't do sunan tawaf. Sunan tawaf basically while menstruating, because that requires tahara. Okay. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لقنوا موتاكم لا إله إلا الله. لقنوا موتاكم. What does لقنوا? And yeah, definitely, everybody's invited to our fiqh of worship, inshallah. Teach your dying ones to say there's no God but God. Man, that's a horrible translation, man. That's a horrible translation. Let's see, what does that mean? Because if you say teach your dying ones, it's not teach. It's basically التلقين is to somehow let the person repeat after you. That's التلقين. Okay? Repeat after you. So you're giving instruction, maybe? Well, teaching is different. Or maybe it's a connotation, maybe, and what it carries, perhaps. موتاكم لا إله إلا الله. And it's not there's no God but God. That's an oxymoron right there. It's that there's no God worthy of worship but Allah. Okay? Because if you were to say there's no God but God, that's an oxymoron. There's no God worthy of worship but Allah. Okay. Okay. What should we do? It is 1:48. So what we'll do, inshallah, we'll stop right here, and you could see we're really getting close to our, of course, we're at 183. So hopefully maybe tomorrow we can finish another set of 10 and get back to our tafsir, inshallah. I'm excited about that too. So we'll stop right here, inshallah. And I could see, mashallah, Karima's back yesterday. She was absent.
I want to ask you a favor.
Go ahead, Nora.
Do you have like 5 minutes or something? I just
Sure.
I wanted to record like a small video on why it's so important, like for the fiqh of worship. Is that okay?
You want me to stop the recording and then you're going to do another recording? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yes.
Okay, Nora, you caught me off guard, but okay.
No, because it is. I mean, it's important. Like
Oh,
the
absolutely.
sisters are caught. They don't know when their period is stopping. They don't know when to start praying again. They don't know all this stuff, and it's fard.
No, Nora, I'm so bad at marketing, to be honest. I'm so bad at marketing.
That's
Um,
okay.
I must admit, I'm so bad at marketing.
All
And
you have to do is just okay. I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna ask you. So why should we or like
you gotta really provoke me, Nora. You really gotta provoke me like hard and stuff. I'm usually not an easy person to provoke. Psych.
Okay,
That's
I'll
not,
provoke
no,
you.
I
Okay,
am easily provoked,
all
Nora.
right.
That's
Just let
not
me
actually
start.
true.
Just let me start.
Okay. Well, so here, hold on.